So, good morning to everyone. Today I am going to talk about the um, artificial neural network. This artificial neural network is a unit in third paper of Biophysics, semester 5. In this unit, uh, under the heading of evolutionary computation, one of the unit is artificial neural network, next is the genetic algorithm, and then RNA, DNA, and denaturization or renaturization of it. So let us discuss about the neural network. It can be termed as a biological neural network and artificial neural network. And the objective of this unit is to produce artificial systems capable of sophisticated computation similar to human brain. The biological analogy and some main idea about the neural network are given as in human body, the brain is composed of a mass of interconnected neurons. Each neuron is connected to many other neurons, and neurons transmit electrical signal to each other for exchanging the information and data. Whether a signal is transmitted in an all or nothing event, the electrical potential in the cell body of the neuron is threshold. Whether a signal is sent depend on the strength of bond snaps between two neurons. So these neurons, the cell form information processing in the brain, the fundamental functional unit of all neuron system tissue. So this neuron consists of various parts, and these parts are soma, dendrites, axons, and synapses. So neuron, we can classify this neuron in basically three parts. One is the head. This bigger part is termed as the head of the neuron. Here it is tail of the neuron, and this one is the body of the neuron. So the head of neuron have one nucleus. This is the nucleus. Then the connecting part and dendrite and here cell body are soma, which connect with the another part of the neuron is synapse, and then the body of this neuron is action, and this action is orbitarized as the tail part is synapses. These synapses are connected, these are the connected points to the next neuron. So one neuron structure, this is the biological neuron, connected to the other neurons with the dendrite and synapse to the other part of these neurons. How can we compare this brain versus digital computers? Computers require hundreds of cycles to simulate a firing of a neuron. The brain can fire all neurons in the single step, that is the parallelism. What I mean to say in this case is, once you are recalling any event in your brain, then every part is start of acting in its own way simultaneously, and this concept is called parallelism. Serial computers require billions of cycles to perform some tasks, but the brain takes less than a second. That is, as in case of face recognition, if you met someone long back and you see then you can recognize immediately. The complete process is known as face recognition, and this face recognition is completely information exchange through the neuron in the brain. So one information, that is signal received from our eye, light signal, which is transmitted to the brain, and the brain store the data, and then data gives the information regarding the fish. So if we compare, this one is human to computer on the basis of various points, that is processing elements, interconnects, cycle per second, and the rate of improvements. So we find that the processing unit, that is neurons. So in human body, there are 100 billion. 100 billion, million is 10 to the power 6, billion is 10 to the power 9, and 100 here 10 to the power 11. So this is 10 to the power 11 billion neurons are in the human brain. While in computer, we have 100 million gates, logic gates. There are interconnects. One neuron can connect thousands other neurons, connectivity. The high connectivity in the neurons, we will later see how these are connected. And in case of computer, a few neurons are connected. Cycle per second, here it is 1000 cycle per second, but here it is 500 million, very large. In case of human skeleton, human body, human structure, human different characteristic, these are changing within 2 lakhs year. So it is improvement is very slow, while in case of computer, every 2 years it is changing, and we all know the famous Bayes law. So on the basis of this natural neuron, biological neuron, it was attempted to develop the artificial neuron, and the process was started long back. In 1943, these two scientists, McCulloch and Pitts, show that neurons can be combined to construct a Turing machine using logic gates and R's and NOTs. In 1958, Rosenblatt showed that perceptrons will cover if what they are trying to learn can be represented by the machine learning system. In 1969, Minoxi and Puppet showed the limitations of perceptrons, and that is killing research for a decade due to the technological slow development in this field. Then after a long back gap, in 1985, back proportion algorithm revitalized this field. Means whatever you have the information, that information as the output is not as per the expectation of the input signal, then you can feed back the signal back to the original input, and then you can modify and take the output. So it is the back propagations. Now a neuron network is a system composed of many simple processing elements operating in parallel, which can acquire, store, and utilize experimental knowledge. Means there are several work these neurons network system are doing. These are acquire the knowledge, store the data, utilize that data for the experimental information and compose. So what is artificial neural network? Artificial neural network is each element of neural network is a node called unit. That unit is formed with the combination of various logic gates. units are connected through the links. There are so many links that will be clear later on in this picture. Each link has a numerical weight. If one input unit is connected to another unit, either it is output unit or some intermediate units, then that linkage has some definite value, and that definite value is something like a numerical weight, as we are considering the weighted function in case of static tissue. So this is again the natural unit, and in this natural unit we have this one is artificial unit. So on the basis of this natural unit, that is, this one is considered as head, in which there is one nucleus which store the information, passing through this action with the electrical potential and to the other part of the neurons. The same information is given in this case. There is an input linkage, here it is the input linkage, and this one is one unit, that is input function, and then there is an activation function, some mathematical function, and that mathematical function process the input value and give the output, and this output is connected to the output linkage for other kind of the neurons. So one unit is connected to other unit. This unit is also coming from this part of the unit. So the decision must be taken on the following way. The number of units to use means whether all the units are being used or some finite units, the type of units required, what kind of the units. Yes, specific units are there in their characteristic and action, and how these are connected. These units are connected with a certain linkage, and that link, as it is earlier said, that some links of the different kind have different weight. What kind of this? So how this ANN learned a task, initialize the weight. Initialize the weight means it gives the strengthen of the linkage. As it is very common to say that if you are not having remember any subject, any diagram, any statement, then it is advised to write 5 times. If you are writing the same thing 5 times, then what actually happened? This 5 time writing of the same thing, drawing the diagram, gives the weight factor. That will increasing its weight factor from 0 to 1. The minimum weight factor is 0 and the maximum weight factor is 1. So from 0 to 1, this weight factor is running. Then use of a logarithm, learning logarithm, set of training examples, that if the input is this much and applying some mathematical function, we must have this kind of output. So what will be the training function? Encode the example at the input. Convert output into meaningful result. Whatever, we receive the signal in the form of electrical pulse. So that electrical pulse must be converted into the meaningful form. What do mean by this electrical signals, and we have to convert it. Now you see the simple example. These are the 2 units, I1 and I2 input units, and here are again 2 units, H1, H4, that is hidden unit, and here it is output unit, that is O5. So in this diagram, we try to explain the action for 5 units. This one is unit 1, here it is unit 2, this is unit 3, this is unit 4, and this is unit 5. Intentionally, the diagram of all units, the shape of all units are keeping in a different way so that it may understand of the different nature. Suppose this I1, this unit has to pass a signal to unit 3. So from 1 to 3 means there is a link which connect from unit 1 to unit 3. Then they have developed a weight factor that is W12. If unit 1 is connected to unit 4, that is there is a link between 1 to 4. So corresponding to this link, there is a weight factor. It is termed as 1 to 4. Now the second input unit, this input unit is connected second to third. Then the weight factor developed corresponding this link is W weight 2, 3, second to third, and this is second to fourth. So corresponding weight factor is W 3 to 2 to 4. So these are the two layers, that is input layers and hidden layers. From this hidden layer, H3 is connected to O5, the output unit, means a link between unit 3 to unit 5. Then this link develop a corresponding weight factor 3 to 5. Weight 3 to 5, W 3 to 5. And here, unit 4 is connected to unit 5. Thus, link from unit 4 to 5 develop a weight factor that is W4 to 5. So in this way, by connectivity, we have the various weight factors, and these are W12, W14, W23, W24, W35, and W45. So these are the several weight factors that has developed between the several units. And later on we'll see that these weight factors can be systematically represented in the form of matrix. But right now here we are not interested to write the matrix between all the weight factors, but it can be written in the form of the matrix. And each weight has some definite discrete value, and that value gives the information processing result. And that output will have meaningful information. Now, there are two types of the components. Whenever we are studying the network, then we classify this network in two ways. One is linear network, other is non-linear network. How can you differentiate? The linear network, the input function calculate weighted sum of all inputs. This is very simple. You have to weight W12, W13, W24, W23, W35, W45. So all the weights are sum, and then sum may be calculated in a linear form. Non-linear, there must be some activation function, that is some mathematical expression which transforms sum into some activation level. What kind of activation level? So the input function, this is if you are summing. So summation this J is Wij Ai, and this Wi dot Ai input Ni. Activation function, that is G. This part is augment of the function G, and this G of input gives the AI, that is the output function. So output function A is nothing but the transform of G. As we see that there is a transform sum into activation level. So this is the input function, and G is the transformation, and this transforms into the output level of the function. Now, in more detail, but for a particular model, as the AI output is a function G of N input, this input. A simple function is something like this. So what is G? G a function, this G function, it is expressed something like integration, and this activation function. This activation function has different nature. This activation function is different. So this simple relation, the output is a function of some input, can be expressed in this unit of the processing. This is summation input function, and here it is the output function. This input is obtained AI, weight factor JI. These are the several linkages, and these several linkages with the weight factor is summing here. This summing function is transformed to this function, activation function, which give the output AI. This is the AI, and this output is given some meaningful form to the next unit of the neurons. So this kind of the system is considered. So use different function to obtain different models. The three most common choice of the activation function are: first, step function; second is sine function; and third is sigmoid function. So these three functions, the application of function depends upon the nature of input and its calculation. So an output of 1 represents firing of a neuron down to actions. So this is the output, and this output is, we can draw the simple activation function as the simplest is step function. This is the step function. So AI is this y-axis, and here it is x-axis, that is input function. So up to that level, the output value is 0, and from this time, the output is increased and it will achieve its maximum value for a longer time. So for particular this time t is less than particular time, the output is 0, and for the time greater than this, output is 1. So this one is something like a step function, that is 0 and 1. So the other is sine function. Sine function, this one is say origin, and this is your input. So the origin, if the time is negative, time is less than this input, this part is less than 0, so the value is -1, and if it is greater than 0, the value is positive. So such type of function is known as sine function. Means we define a threshold value, and less than that threshold value, the function is negative, that is -1, and the greater than that threshold value, the output is positive, which is the output function. We can differentiate this one is as step function, sine function, and another is sigmoid function. There is some mathematical relation. Sigmoid function is 1 upon 1 plus e raised to the power this time, input time, what kind of the time function is. Here it is step function, x is greater than that particular time, then it is 1, otherwise 0. Here if it is greater than positive, then positive plus 1, and it is negative, that is -1, and this kind of the sigmoid function. So we have three activation function basically used in the case of artificial neural network. So this artificial neural network, by using this kind of the function, gives some output, but this output is not as per our expectation. So as the current computer, a wrong model of thinking is human cannot be doing the sequential analysis we are trying, because the many neurons are acting simultaneously. Neurons are a million times slower than the gates, but the connectivity is very fast. Humans do not need to be rebooted or debugged when one bit die. So this one is advantage of human brain in comparison to the neurons. And then there is a many steps, 100 steps program constant. Neuron operate on the order of 10 to the power -3 seconds, that is millisecond. Human can process information in a fraction of the second as phrase recognition. So in this case, you cannot determine the time of this one. Hence, at the most, a couple of hundred serial operations are possible simultaneously in human brain. That is, even in parallelism, no chain of reasoning can involve more than 100 to 1,000 steps. So, in standard structure of artificial neural network and human neural network, we classify this total unit in three parts. Input unit represents the input as a fixed length vector of number used. Hidden unit calculate threshold weight sum of the input represent intermediate calculation that the network, and the output unit represent the output as the fixed length vector in the number. And these are representation, these are the logic rules, decision, nearest neighbor, probability through the probability table, and then the neural network input 0 to 1. And these are the notations. These notations are very important for discussing the whole concept. AI activation value of unit I, also the output of unit. This AI is the vector of activation value for the input to the unit. G activation function. G does derivative of the activation function, that is differential coefficient of activation function. Error, difference between the output and target for the unit. Error, for example, E, I activation of a unit I in the input layer, and this capital I is the vector of activation to all units, and this vector of input, for example, E particular notation. Then weighted sum of the inputs I, the total number of units in the network N. This is O, activation function of the single output unit of the perceptron, OI activation of a unit I in the output layer. O is this capital O is the vector of activation of all unit in the output layer. This is threshold for the step function. T, target desired output of for a perceptron. Capital T, target vector when there are several output units. TE, particular example 1. This is JI, WJI, weight on the link from unit J to unit I. WJ, weight from unit I to the output of the perceptron. This is J, the vector of weight leading to input I. W is vector of all weights of the network. And then we can develop this function as the output function is a function of, this is weight I, J means weight from unit J to I. Here it is input value corresponding, then WIK, the input corresponding K, and similarly, where Fx is a threshold activation function, and this Fx is 1 upon 1 plus E minus output. So this one is a sigmoid function. This one is a sigmoid function, and if it is a particular value less than 0 and greater than 1 is positive, then it is a step function. And here it is the network, total network of the artificial value. So today we like to stop here. On the next lecture, I will start from this part, that is artificial neural network and its different form. Thank you very much for this lecture, and I hope this one is a point that you have to understand, and this one is the part